good morning, or good afternoon. Hello. I would like to present tissues to you. This is going to be the start of our next chapter. We skipped chapter 2 and 3 in this textbook based on the fact that 2 is molecules. You should have learned basic molecules in chemistry. That's usually a prerequisite course to this class. Um, Also, chapter 3 is cells, and in biology we cover cells. So we're hoping that you have a basic understanding of chemistry and cells as you go into this. Please make sure to ask questions as necessary so that way you have a clear understanding of what it is that we are going to be studying. Okay, so in your notebook, you want to start with a fresh page. You want to draw your 2.5-inch line down the left-hand side to leave that margin blank for your vocabulary words. You want to make sure to head your paper with the title, as well as putting your name at the top, so that way when you photograph your notes to turn them in, you will have your name at the top of the page as well, okay? So what we want to do is we want to start contemplating and thinking about the fact that chemicals in our environment are something that we studied in chemistry, and you studied atoms, and those atoms are things like hydrogen, oxygen, carbon. Okay, so we know that those atoms have certain qualities to them, and hopefully from chemistry you remember that carbon has 4 bonding locations, oxygen has 2, hydrogen has 1. So when you take the 2 bonding places of oxygen and you add 2 hydrogen molecules, which have 1 place, you then get what we call a water molecule, the most abundant substance on Earth. So please remember that chemistry is the reason why molecules join the way they do. It's the reason why they bond the way they do. And remember that a molecule is going to be a group of atoms that are bonded together. Okay? Now, what's interesting about molecules is molecules are considered to be non-living. So, what does make something living? Well, that's the big question that's always been asked. So, I want you guys to think about the fact that you have a chemical level of atoms and molecules, and like the molecule DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Your DNA is specific to you, but you share about 50% of your DNA with a banana tree. So, as strange as that seems, and as much as people like to think that we are not like bananas, well, we really are like bananas. And how are we like bananas? Well, we start as a seed. And after that seed grows, we then have to mature. And as we mature, we produce our own seeds and we're able to reproduce ourselves. Okay, so it's really important to remember that growth is part of a living thing, metabolizing energy. Okay, now we're different than a banana because we cannot capture the sun's light in chloroplasts. We don't have any chloroplasts that are going to allow us to harness the sun's energy directly. So, where do we get our energy from? From eating plants, okay? But in our bodies, we do the same things with them. A banana needs to grow new cells. A banana needs to move water around. A banana needs to move the proteins necessary to different locations to sprout new leaves, to grow bananas, okay? And all of those things are really important in order to have a living thing survive. So, what's interesting is you have chemicals, and at a certain point, those chemicals become cells. And how those chemicals become cells, again, is the mystery of life. Those cells can operate on their own. If they operate on their own, they're single cellular organisms, okay? And those cells can survive, metabolize, grow all on their own. Well, more complicated organisms like us, well, our cells get together, and the cells that perform the same function are considered to be what we call tissues. So you recorded the 4 types of tissues, I believe, already. If you haven't, they are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and neural tissue. And when tissues work together, they're going to make organs. So, for example, here we have the stomach. The stomach is going to have muscle layers, it's going to have epithelial layers, it's going to have a serous membrane, which is going to be connective tissue. Okay, and so all of those tissues are going to work together for a function. And your stomach's function is going to be to pass food, chewed up food mixed with saliva, some digestive enzymes, and it's going to work on passing that food into the small intestines. Okay, and at the small intestines, that's where we're going to have a different function. Okay, so each tissue is going to perform a function, and when those tissues get together, they form an organ, and then that organ has a specific function. Now, an organ doesn't work by itself. Your stomach does not work by itself. Your stomach comes down the esophagus, I'm sorry, your food comes down the esophagus, goes into your stomach. There is chemical change and mechanical change that's going to make your food different as it then passes into the small intestines. So now we have a group of organs working together. Well, what is the point of passing food through your small intestines? So that way you can absorb the nutrients and energy in the food you eat, and you're able then to acquire the energy necessary for your metabolism, for your basic function. Okay, so organs work together for organ systems. Okay, so now this is what you are going to write in your notes underneath where you wrote tissues. You are going to write that the basic structure is an atom. You're going to put a little arrow there to show a little flow chart because atoms bond together through chemistry and they make molecules. Those molecules are going to grow in size and complexity as an organism grows in size and complexity. The smallest little organisms have very little DNA and they are very, very simple, whereas large organisms have large molecules, they have very complex organization, and of course, those molecules are going to work together to become cells. Now, our body is made up of about 30 trillion cells, and that number is a bit crazy. I don't think we understand the concept of trillions, but I will do an activity that will help us understand that a little bit later on in the year. Okay, so we said those cells work together to make tissues. Remember, tissues are going to be similar cells with the same function. Okay, so remember, they're going to be similar, they're not always identical. Okay, all right, next we have organs. I gave the example of the stomach. You know, as your stomach grumbles and moves around and tells you that you're hungry, you know that it's got communication cells in there that are communicating with your brain saying that you're hungry. You produce stomach acid to digest your food, and so that stomach acid is something produced by your stomach in order to work with the system. So now you've got 2 different types of tissues there working together in order to pass your food along through those organs, which makes up the organ systems. Okay, so I've mentioned the digestive system. The digestive system is how we digest and absorb nutrients into our body and fuel our body with the required resources. Okay, and last but not least, those organ systems, there were 11 of them. You saw that those 11 systems work together to make the human body. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put these 2 definitions up. Please notice these are underlined. You are going to underline them as well. Okay, so tissue, they're similar cells with the same function. And histology is the study of tissues. So if you think to our project, we called it the histology project. We are going to go through a study of tissues. This concludes the introduction to tissues.